Hello and welcome to the Meaning Project podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel A. Franz. As always, it is my pleasure to bring a little bit of meaning, purpose, resilience, mental health, psychedelics, and today's substance abuse. I owe you an apology. Last week, I recorded this podcast. I recorded a podcast on the nature of addictions, but apparently I didn't record it because there was no audio, just video. So for those of you listening to the podcast, that didn't happen. And if you watch the video, I'm sorry, you just saw me moving my lips. Um, don't worry. I have the entire production team on it trying to figure out what the problem was and where that went to. And by the entire production team, I hope by now you realize that simply means just me. So that was a loss, but maybe a good loss because I kind of went back to my thoughts when I recorded that and maybe did a little bit more work, maybe did a little bit more research. The last one I recorded was really more about kind of where I was feeling after a rough couple weeks of sessions related to substance abuse and addiction, because it had certainly addictions in my office a lot lately. I mean, I'm a licensed clinical addictions counselor, so that kind of makes sense. Um, do you find it kind of ironic? I do. Well, we can talk through that, but I'm a licensed clinical addictions counselor, have been for about 25 years now, wearing an Indiana Psychedelic Society t-shirt. Also, today, big day. The reason I'm wearing this is technically my, what I like to call my cap and gown. Today's graduation day for the Integrative Psychiatry Institute Psychedelic Assisted Therapy Certification Program. By graduation, I mean this is our last major intensives, about 8 hours of lecture today. Of course. There's also 12 hours of supplemental material that needs to be gone over afterwards, quizzes to be taken, and then a 200 question final exam. Ideally, I knock that out here soon. But it is interesting how I've learned the field of substance abuse and addictions goes really well with psychedelic research. So we'll see if we get to that here today. But just a reminder, although today is the graduation from the IPI program, I have now been offering my ketamine in my office for about 5 months with oh man, so much cool success. A lot of good things going on there. And I've studied intensely psilocybin, and I'm a believer, and I am open to working with people in that medicine where it is legal. Um, I've heard some great discussion about journeys and therapeutic opportunities in Colorado and Oregon. And there are new places opening up, legislation everywhere. So that's something you are interested in. Let's chat. But last week and now today is about the nature of addictions. Why? As I said, um, addiction has certainly been in my office a lot recently, and one particular case really just rocked me. I mean, I remember coming home and it was rough. Um, a young man came to my office intoxicated. It was late in the afternoon and he was still intoxicated. Had been drinking for about 10 days. And now, you know, when Jimmy Buffett sings, I have been drunk now for over 2 weeks. I've passed out and I rallied and I sprung a few leaks. I always thought that was a cute challenge. Gee, that would be interesting. 2 weeks of intoxication. What would that be like? Um, I can tell you what I saw in my office. It was heartbreaking. As most alcoholics do, this person had been drinking vodka for, almost 2 weeks. Um, because it was triggered by difficulties in relationships. And I talk about this a lot in my men's group and with other people struggling with addictions and substance abuse. Like, relationships, in my experience, are one of the biggest triggers to relapse. It's that one thing in our lives, we can't control other people. We can't control their reactions. All we can control is ourselves. And sometimes relationships are one of the greatest dangers to recovery. Unhealthy relationships, that is. Um, so yeah, I had been drinking vodka for a while just to get the intoxication, but knew he had an appointment with me that day and wanted to help. And so he was trying on his own to titrate down and had been drinking wine just to get rid of the shakes. Um, so, I mean, he was intoxicated enough just to get rid of the physical sensations of withdrawal. And looking across the office at him and the look in his eyes, the pain and the shame was brutal, heartbreaking. Um, that's me as a person seeing that. Me as a clinician knew that we had to get this person to detox pretty quickly. Alcohol and benzodiazepines, Xanax, Valium, Ativan, are the only two substances that the withdrawal process can kill you. Um, Opiates, heroin, may make you feel like you want to die, but alcohol withdrawal and benzodiazepine withdrawal can kill you. Ironically, we treat alcohol withdrawal by giving people benzodiazepines. That's pretty jacked up in my opinion, but that's strangely what works. So, yeah, dang, it's been an extra week since then, and just thinking back to that look in his eyes still kind of shakes me up a bit. It's when you see somebody that genuinely wants help, it's hard, right? When they are struggling so bad against themselves, against their addiction, and really want to be better. Now, there are plenty of people that come into my office that don't want to be better. They're forced to be there. We have so many addictions available to us in our times, right? Alcohol, marijuana, the two legal ones, right? Cocaine, heroin, opiates, shopping, Amazon.com, spending, gambling, porn, food. Our food supply is so addictive these days. I think I've told you about a book, The End of Overeating. I believe it's by Kessler. It's in my office right now. I probably read it 20 years ago, and it's horrifying. And I've told you about it before. It's about the food industry's intent to sell more by making their food addictive. Oh, man, I can go down that rabbit hole for a while. But what is the nature of addiction, right? Talk about the gentleman in my office struggling with alcohol, a self-proclaimed alcoholic. Another person I've known for a long time, since the days in the adolescent treatment center, um, who's done better, kicked opiate withdrawal, alcohol or opiate addiction, alcohol addiction, Adderall addiction, but really struggles with gas station supplements, right? These things you can get that, 10 years ago it was bath salts, right? We didn't even know what's in them. And now you can get other natural supplements that, can be uppers or downers, but can be sometimes hard to shake. And, it's interesting to see somebody go from really hard addiction as a young person to still struggling to find that way to feel better today. And of course, sadly, God, I see so much porn addiction in my office. Young people, old people. At one time, it was damn near a rite of passage. It was an unhealthy, odd rite of passage that, as a young person, you found somebody's nudie magazine. I think that's what we call them, nudie, right? In an older brother's drawer or some, you know, it it was secretive and it was hard to find. Today it's just as secretive, but it's so much easier to find. We have our smartphones that we keep very private. And for this gentleman, he found it at a very young age. Probably came across it at 10 o'clock. The age or 10 o'clock, 10 years old. The age at which many young people are curious, right? This happens. If you're parenting out there, Young people are curious about their bodies, but our schools are giving them tablets and laptops too early because then they can look this stuff up or they can look it up on mom or dad or whoever's device. And I tell you what, natural, developmentally appropriate curiosity turns into insanely inappropriate and grotesque findings on the internet. And for this person, it's led to well over a decade of addiction, feeding that need to feel better. Um, Human beings have sought to alter reality, right? To escape reality, to relax a little bit, or to have spiritual experiences for tens of thousands of years. But we've got some serious problems today. So, my history, this is always fun to recount. I think I've gone through this before, but so my history with addiction, I was trying to remember why I got into the substance abuse field. And I think this is the path, when you get older, it's kind of hard to remember how you wound up places. I think I told you I had asked my dad why in the heck they sent me off to college because I wasn't a good high school student. And that was just a few years ago. But I took some time to think about it. And, through college, undergrad, graduate school, um, I needed a couple extra bucks. Wanted to make some pizza money, wanted to make beer money, whatever you want to call it. Needed a job. Wanted a job in my field, found the job in my field, went to work at an adolescent treatment center. At that time, that adolescent treatment center probably helped about 100, 120 people a day, was set up with 10 cottages. Each cottage had a different age group, different gender, probably about 10 or 12 young people. Through my time there, I became a supervisor and then a shift supervisor. And then in my year-long sabbatical after I didn't get into grad school, I was really wondering what to do with life. And I eventually got into grad school to become a therapist, and this place was expanding to serve 300 people a day. And I got to open its outpatient unit. And one of the things I saw as part of my graduate studies and part of my internship, one of the things I saw was um, there wasn't a lot of parental involvement. Most of these kids were court ordered, and their parents didn't want to be involved. So when I graduated and it was time to move to the big city of Indianapolis with my girlfriend, who was going to become my wife at that time, I found an innovative and successful adolescent substance abuse treatment program. And the thing that appealed to me is it really involved the family. And I thought that was all kinds of cool. And as I think about it, I don't think I knew squat about substance abuse and addictions. We didn't get much training in it in grad school. And so I started to read whatever I could. One of the books I read was George R. Ross's Adolescent Substance Abuse Treatment. Excuse me. George R. Ross spent some time in jail because he wanted to help people so badly he ended up yeah, kidnapping some kids or was charged with kidnapping, sorry, allegedly. Um, but that's it. The way this was so innovative is it employed the parents, or the parents were responsible for housing the kids after hours, the adolescents with substance abuse treatment, with substance abuse issues. And it was pretty interesting, but boy, it led to some well, interesting, odd situations. So I'm working in this addictions treatment center based on Ross's model, several other models, but also on the encounter groups. That was a word I couldn't remember when I recorded last time. Encounter groups of the 60s and 70s. Now, these encounter groups were loosely based on psychology. They were mostly based on weird practices of the 60s and 70s. And a lot of them are the reason we had to have licensing requirements. Um, if you've ever watched, Netflix had a great series, maybe just last year, 4-part series from several young people who went through some of these different adolescent treatment programs, much worse, cruel in some ways. It's called The Program. I froze in terror watching, I think it was episode 3 of The Program, when they go through the history of some of these treatment centers. And the adolescent treatment center I worked in was listed there at on one of the kind of the bottom rung of a ladder. But there were some things about that treatment center that weren't helpful. There were a lot of things that were helpful, but one of the things I learned was a lot about the 12 steps and the abstinence model. And I mean, that was my introduction to substance abuse treatment, addiction treatment, etc. And I was I had to toe the line and prescribe the program, but I didn't always agree with it. So I did other reading and research. And the one thing, I was there for, I don't know, a little less than a decade, did a lot of management there and things like that. But one of the things I learned that really struck me was when a parent, a mother, came up to me, and here I am, probably in my 30s, pretty young, just starting out with babies of my own. And here this older parent with a teenager comes up to me and says, Mr. Franz, uh, you, I believe what you're teaching, but you mean to tell me that because my daughter had some problems at her age now, and she had some pretty significant drug problems, enough to be in 6 to 12 months of adolescent treatment, you mean to tell me that in 5 or 10 years, when my daughter gets married, I cannot toast or celebrate her wedding with a glass of champagne with her? And I thought, man, to prescribe to a 17-year-old abstinence for life, that was a tough pill for me to swallow. I wasn't sure I agreed with it. And personally, for me, that's because of my personal beliefs. I enjoy craft beer. I enjoy a glass of bourbon or scotch every once in a while. But I also know my limits. I've also gone beyond my limits before too. Um, and so to understand that, it really put me down a path of trying to research and read everything I could about the nature of addictions and why. And eventually, um, I went on to teach addictions at the local uh, satellite for Indiana University, a couple different places really, but I was teaching graduate addictions, and one of the textbooks that I was prescribed to use in the first chapter said, we want you to introduce the class your first day with your students. Use this video. So, okay, cool. What's this video? It was a Saturday Night Live clip from the 70s with the great cast, right? Steve Martin, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Jim Belushi, that group. And it was Steve Martin as Theodoric of York, the medieval barber. Again, I am I'm setting the tone for 16 weeks of graduate school education in addictions with the 1970s Saturday Night Live video. And the video shows Steve Martin, he's the medieval barber. Barbers back then were also your physicians, right? In the 1500s. And what was their favorite prescription? Leeches, bleeding, take some blood, take a pint. No matter what they came in for, it was take a pint. Take a pint. Bill Murray comes in, classic Bill Murray style. I was drinking a little too much mead at the vernal equinox and I got ran over by the oxy. Sorry, that is probably a terrible. Yeah, I shouldn't do that on the podcast. My wife hates it, but um, yeah, he gets run over. Both his legs are crushed, and Steve Martin says, "Take some blood." And Bill Murray says, "I think I've given enough." So then he hangs him upside down. They do all these weird things, right? People are dying in the barber shop, in the medical place, and at the end, Steve Martin says, "But wait, maybe I can employ the scientific method. Maybe I can do research and find what works, and then share it with other people." And he says, "Nah, why in the world is this textbook asking me to share this to graduate students?" Well, because in that textbook, that was the nature of addictions. We don't know what we're talking about. We don't know for sure. Every chapter in that textbook, and it's back here behind me somewhere, had a fascinating evidence-based practice. Well, trying to be an evidence-based practice, because at the end it said, we're not sure if this is going to work. It needs more research and more money involved in it. And here I was teaching young therapists, well, good luck. And so I had to start formulating my own ideas, right? The AA 12-step model worked somewhat for some people, but not always. And I just kind of naturally started going more of a cognitive behavioral approach. As I studied logotherapy and Frankel, I started to sprinkle in meaning. It made sense to me. A lot of addictions start, many people tell me, young people, I was bored and this was something to do, even adults, right? One of my favorite books, oh my God, you got to read it. Johann Hari recounts, and I can't remember who did the research, the famous rat park research of decades ago, right? You put a rat in a cage by himself. You give him two bottles, one bottle of water with heroin in it. What's the rat going to do? It is going to consume that heroin until it dies. Somebody else came along and said, well, that's stupid because human beings aren't rats in a cage. Human beings have things to do. They have lives, they have jobs, they have partners, they have sex, they have food. And so they redid this study, but they gave the rats a rat park. They gave them things to do, other rats to fornicate with, good food, exercise equipment. You know what they found out? They tried the heroin water and they didn't like it. They found other things more meaningful to engage in. That's part of my belief, part of uh, my theory of addictions. My God, how self-important is that? Dr. Dan's theory of addictions. The way I practice helping people is encouraging them to find a better rat park. We talk a lot about rat park in Hari's book. Hari's book is Chasing the Scream. I won't tell you why it's called Chasing the Scream. It is a important part of the book. Fascinating book. Beautiful to listen to, beautiful to read. But, you know, as I was, when I recorded this previously or didn't record it previously, uh, a lot of it was just kind of my personal thoughts. I did some research, just research. I hopped online. We can't call hopping online and looking stuff up research anymore, right? Research is actually double blind study, whatever. Um, look some things up. And I was reminded, right? So Dr. Gabor Mate, M-A-T-E, leading trauma specialist, has a theory and has written prolifically that a lot of addiction is predicated by adolescent trauma, deficits in the brain, a need for reward. And, you know, he worked in some of the worst places of Canada, British Columbia, and you know, the addicts he worked with often, you know, went so far as to die, and he thought um, significant early life trauma was a part of it. I really like the theories of Lance Dodes, Dodes. It's a very cognitive behavioral approach about triggers and what the trigger is, and it's amazing. He talks about how the trigger to use often happens hours before the actual use. That there's an idea, a lack of control, a loss of control, somebody controlling you at some point in the day that you go, man, I can't wait to get home and have a drink or a snort or a smoke. And for some people, when we talk about that, when we work through that, they get to that point. One of the things I teach is just ask why. Why are you having that drink? Why are you having that next drink? Why are you lighting up that joint? Why are you cutting up that cocaine? What's the why? You know, as Frankl teaches us, between stimulus and response is the ability to pause and think and to ask yourself why. My friend and colleague, who really has no idea who I am, Dr. Jordan Peterson, he's got a great video from his early days on the neurobiology of addiction. A student asked him, you know, what is it about addiction? And he reminds us, you know, when we engage in a behavior, it strengthens the particular neural pathway. And every time you engage in that behavior, it strengthens that neural pathway just a little bit more and then lessens other neural pathways. So if you repeat a behavior hundreds or thousands of times, you have built and strengthened a strong neural pathway in that direction. It's really hard to go, I'm going to have a trigger at work and then go this other direction where I'm going to go for a walk in the woods or go for a run or go talk to somebody. It's hard. It's possible. And that's where maybe where the AA and NA model comes in, right? Like our powerlessness and having the will, turning our will over to the care of God as we understood him or her. It's an abstinence-based model, and the 12 steps have worked for a lot of people. Now, ironically, and this is not something, boy, I want to get, watch out, everybody. This is where Dr. Dan gets canceled. It's pretty well documented that Bill Wilson, one of the two founders, Bill W, as he's lovingly called, um, used acid, had some very spiritual experiences. And AA is definitely focused on spirituality, not religion, but spirituality, God as you understand him or her. And again, one more kind of pat on the back of psychedelics that they don't have the chemical hooks that get into you that make it as addictive. Now, you could get addicted to the experience and want to do it over and over. Well, that's not a good idea. Um, but sometimes, a lot of times, psychedelics can be healing. Bill W is an example of that. From AA and NA, I remember this in my treatment center days, right? We have the disease model that addiction is a disease and it needs to be treated like that. There's the biopsychosocial model that this comes from part genetics, part nature and nurture. Where does it come from? How does it get treated? There's the self-medication idea that, people are looking for a reward, right? This goes along with the reward deficiency model. Something in the brain doesn't find other things rewarding but these substances. And these substances, a lot of these substances, and even pornography, can, again, fire up that neural pathway in one direction and make other things less appealing, right? If you're engaging in viewing some obscene or obscure versions of pornography, it's really hard to make normal intimacy, right? Healthy intimacy the norm. Well, this goes for substances and shopping as well, right? These are all addictive things. I've heard some people call this idea of self-medication, right? The easy button. Man, I just need an easy button to feel better. Going for a run's hard. Talking to other humans is hard. Just hitting this easy button and putting something up your nose or in your stomach that goes throughout your body, it's predictable. Well, until it isn't. For a lot of people, they know how it's going to make them feel. That's why they keep going. Right. So there's the stages of change, but I almost forgot about that one, right? That, human behavior, the stages of change, let's see if I can get them now, right? There's the pre-contemplation where we don't even know there's a problem. And then somebody's like, hey, you got a problem, or we recognize there's a problem. They're like, I should do something about that. You think about it. That's contemplation, right? And then eventually you put together a plan and you execute the plan. But still with that, um, relapse is always a possibility in those stages of change. These are just a few off the top of my head that I'm familiar with over the years. And we're researching more and more. So, what is the nature of addictions? As Steve Martin tells us, we don't know. We do know we shouldn't be bleeding people anymore. That's not good. Um, we don't always know what will work. I've experienced the hardcore intervention strategies, isolation, cutting people off, we won't talk to you anymore, is never good for anybody. Hari, Hari, in one of his most famous, he's got two great TED Talks, but his famous one, what we know about addictions is wrong. Um, Go watch that. It's so good. Spoiler alert, he ends it with this. You know, the healing in addictions is connection. And through his book, he researches the heck out of that, and it's pretty dang accurate. Connecting people with other healthy people, connecting them with the ones they love, connecting them with healthier relationships can be incredibly powerful. Finding other meaningful things. We do not have a unified theory of addictions yet. Just that dozen or so I listed are plenty. What I know from my experience, there's something out there that can help everybody. Some people take more time than others. And a lot of times, people close to them, rightfully so, get frustrated, get tired, get worn out, get angry, and they need just as much support as the person struggling with addiction. They need to unload their feelings, to understand new patterns of behavior. Addiction truly is something that impacts the entire family, whether it's spending addiction, substance addiction, porn addiction, gambling addiction. You can just imagine the ways everybody around the person is affected. And it requires treatment for everybody. But again, Even though we don't know the absolute nature of addiction, we do know, I know, there's always something that can help anybody. We just have to find what works. For some people, maybe it's psychedelics, maybe it's AANA, maybe it's abstinence. You never know until you try. All right, I am late for class. I'm late for opening remarks, but I so wanted to share that with you. My God, I hope this recorded this time. I test the equipment before. You can tell if you're watching the YouTube, right? We went from the mixer and big mic over there to earbuds to now the very cheap, what are these? Unlabeled, unlabeled Amazon 995 headphones. And I'll run this through some AI. It'll make, what do they call that? Magic audio, and hopefully it comes out well. I hope you enjoyed this conversation about addictions. If you'd like to have a conversation, man, I'm always up for that. Share your ideas, post in the comments on YouTube or share the link, whatever, do that thing people ask you to do on different podcasts where you promote it and put it out there. Because, I'm pretty thankful and I want to share this and get this out with other people. Um, I better get to class. As always, thank you for this opportunity to bring a little bit of mental health, meaning, purpose, resilience, psychedelics, substance abuse treatment, and all those other interesting things that we get to share about. Take care.